Hey guys, welcome back to another video. So today since my Ghostbusters review series is now over, I am now going to, and since Frozen Empire is released, of course, I am going to rank all of the Ghostbusters movies from every universe, from the worst to the best. And so let's get into it. Now, at number 5, we have Ghostbusters 2. Now, even though this movie got better the second time I watched it, I still think it's kind of weak. I think that there's some good humor. I think that they had a really interesting idea for a villain, but I think that just ended up being just a weak and safe rehash of the first film, and it didn't take any risks, which everything else in this movie, it took a risk with. This one was like, let's pull it back, let's make it more kiddish, let's make it more like the animated series, The Real Ghostbusters, and let's take away all the smoking, all of the crude humor. Let's get rid of all the stuff that made the first one such a great cinematic masterpiece ever, and just turn it down to 11. And it also didn't help that Dan Aykroyd and Harold Ramis wrote this script after the writer's strike, so they had to rush this out. And this was one of those things too where it's like, you can see that there's good ideas in it and there's good humor in it, but most of the humor is the one-liners. Like, the whole thing about Bill Murray saying, I would like to, like the whole thing about the biological test on the father, I would like to get a biological test on the father, and the Bassmasters thing of like, it's like, oh, Bassmasters is a fishing show. Oh yeah, I know what Bassmasters is. Like, all Bill Murray stuff is hilarious, but I think that the other stuff kind of goes down, and they also, this kind of goes into the first one, but you can't forget the first one doing this, is that they don't give Winston anything to do in this movie, which is kind of one of those things where it's like, okay, righto, like, I guess, sure, but like, I don't know, it's like, you go like, well, what was the point of that? So that's why I think that Ghostbusters 2 is the worst Ghostbusters film ever made. Now, in 4th place for me is Ghostbusters 2016, aka Enter the Call. Now, I think that this movie, what kind of talked about with Ghostbusters 2, right? This one took too much of a risk on people, because I think that this movie, I defend this movie all the time, and I think it's one of those things where they try to do something to be different than the original, and do one of those things where it's like, if you haven't seen the original, people can watch this one and appreciate it for what it is. And I think that the humor hits more than it doesn't hit, and I think that's one of those things where it's like, I think that the actors in here are great. I think that the 4 girls, whether if it's Kristen Wiig or Melissa McCarthy, I think Melissa McCarthy is dialed back a bit, which I appreciated, because I think that when you have things like, I mean, the other movie I like her in is when she has a cameo in Love and Thunder, when she does the play bit, and she's playing Hella. I think that's kind of funny. So, but I have seen some Melissa McCarthy movies, but not a lot. But I do think that she's a really good actress. So I'm just kind of like, I like what you're doing, but this one is like, this one you dial it back enough where I'm getting laughs from you pretty consistently. And I think that Kate McKinnon is a highlight. I think that Chris Hemsworth is good. I think that he is one of those characters that you'd think that make me go like, really? This is what you're doing with this character? but it actually makes me go like, oh, actually, you know what? I can kind of get behind this. So I actually really like that about it. So yeah, and I think that there's a lot of things about this film that I really appreciate and can defend about. Like, the VFX are great. I think that, and I can kind of see where some people will go like, if you just look at it as a ghost comedy not related to Ghostbusters, you can have a better experience, but when you're watching it as a Ghostbusters movie, it fails on every level. I can see that, but also I think that this film does things better than the original, but I don't think that overall it's a better movie than the original, which we'll get to a little later. But I think that 2016 gets a lot of hate for no reason whatsoever, and I think it's so interesting to me that they tried doing something that the fans were like, nah, sorry, we're just going to hate women for the rest of our lives, and then when Captain Marvel comes around, that's going to get terrible reviews as well, and same thing with the Marvels, right? So crap like that, it's just kind of like, this was the birth of that sexist area of the internet that I just am not a big fan of. But I can look at those movies like Captain Marvel, The Marvels, Ghostbusters 2016, and go like, I can appreciate these movies for different things than just going like, even though that Captain Marvel is probably not greatly written, I can still appreciate it for other things and stuff like that. Same thing with Ghostbusters 2016. Now, number 3 for me is where we get to the new release, Ghostbusters Frozen Empire. Now, this is where I get to where, unlike Ghostbusters 2, where it was trying to do a trying to make it more like the cartoon but not like the original movie, Frozen Empire has the perfect balance of going, this is in the same universe as the original 2 movies, but feels like the original, but also has a lot of elements from the real Ghostbusters. And I even watched a video on TikTok recently that was all the different references of just like hints and things of Ghostbusters, Frozen Empire, and real Ghostbusters, right? So, like that whole thing that you even see at the trailer of the car spinning around and driving off, that's from real Ghostbusters. The orange jackets are from the real Ghostbusters. The Ecto-C, or I think it's called the Ecto-3 in the real Ghostbusters, but the motorbike is from the real Ghostbusters. Some of the ghosts kind of resemble ones from the real Ghostbusters. So I'm like, this actually really works, but in the same universe as the first movie and second movie, unlike the second movie that rips away all the goodness about the first movie and makes it more kiddie and kind of unwatchable. This one has the same humor as the original, makes it really good and really stands out, and in the same universe as the original, and it's on par as the original for me. And I really like that about this movie. And I think that they give all the legacy actors important stuff to do, especially when you get to Dan Aykroyd and Ernie Hudson. Like, part of the reason why this is over things like Ghostbusters 2 for me is because that Frozen Empire really gets Ernie Hudson to do a lot more things and be the businessman, and kind of gets him, because the other movies treat him like part of the Ghostbusters, but not really. This one seems like he's more involved with the Ghostbusters, where he's like, he gets the facility to research the different ghosts, and that sort of stuff, and to make the new proton packs, to make the machine to rip out a ghost out of a human, and the ghost out of different objects and things. So, and then Dan Aykroyd, obviously, just raised the heart of the Ghostbusters, so it's like, you need to have him doing stuff constantly throughout, and the golden years subplot between those two, and even like the cameo in the middle of the movie by Bill Murray, and even bringing him back at the end, and doing the whole, heads up, call Dark and Horny at 12 o'clock, that sort of stuff is really good. Janine probably gets, she definitely gets she's the third out of the originals that gets the most to do. but even then, she doesn't really get a lot to do. It's mainly Dan Aykroyd and Ernie Hudson that get the most to do. But I think that Paul Rudd is great. I think the world building in this movie is really strong for this movie. And I think that there's a lot of things in this movie that are so good. And you look at this, and we'll get to this a little later, but there's 4 movies in this franchise that have great action scenes. 2016, the original, and Afterlife, and Frozen Empire. They all have great action scenes. Like, Ghostbusters 2, I think, has good ideas for action scenes, but they don't... But because they're mainly spraying people with mood slime, it doesn't really, like, do a great job with the action scenes. But I feel like that this one gets the action, gets the humor, gets the world building. And also, like I said in the review, shifts away from Gozer in a way that's like, okay. Shifts in a way that Gozer, it's like, Gozer is out. He was in three of the movies, out of five things in the current universe, including Ghostbusters 1, Afterlife, and the video game that takes place between Ghostbusters 2 and Afterlife. So I think that there's a lot of things in the original continuity that doesn't need Gozer in it, if you know what I mean. So that's why I really like Frozen Empire, and there's really 4 Ghostbusters movies out of 5 that are kind of, that depending on my mood, I would switch around and watch depending on the day and how I'm feeling. Number 2 for me is actually Ghostbusters Afterlife. I was not expecting this. I thought I was going to like Frozen Empire a little more, but no, watching Afterlife after Frozen Empire was actually really refreshing, and was actually good seeing how they deal with the Hal Ramis make in that movie, and why Egon broke up with the Ghostbusters to make the Igor Shandor mine, or whatever, the Shandor mine trap inside of it, and the world building in as well of the Shandor mine, that sort of stuff. That it's like we get words of it in the original, but never really see it. This movie has the budget and the time that we can see those things that they were setting up with just lines of dialogue in the original, and we get to see them pay off. And it's one of the best legacy sequels ever made. So I think that it's one of those things where it's like, you look at Afterlife, you look at Frozen Empire, and you go like, this is a way to do legacy sequels. It's a way to introduce new characters that tie into the original movies, but also have a really good story and script that is not just like, hey, look at this. Which, like, I think these movies in No Way Home are some of the greatest legacy sequels that we'll ever see, ever. So I think that there's a lot of things in the Ghostbusters movies that are really strong, and I really like about what they did with the Ghostbusters franchise as a whole. And I really like that. But of course, number 1 for me is, of course, the original Ghostbusters. I think that's one of those movies that's like, if you told me before, I would be like, yeah, I think Afterlife is my favourite, and then because of the way that they deal with the Harold Ramis stuff and all that, and then it would be 2016, and then it would be the original, then it would be 2. But no, I think that's one of those things where it's like, when you watch the first one, it's one of those forgotten comedies for me, where it's like, I know it's a comedy, and I really like it, but do I love it? Like, is it my favourite Ghostbusters movie? If you asked me before Frozen Empire came out, and before I watched the original again, I would have gone like, no, it's not my favourite. But it would still be a 4 out of 5 stars for me. But honestly, it is my favourite. Even though that I think that there's 4 movies that I think that I like for different reasons, that I can appreciate everything about them, and the way that they go around the different routes of Ghostbusters and that sort of stuff. And I don't think there's this one bad Ghostbusters movie, except for 2. 2's the only one that I can't really get into. But I think that the original is a classic, and it's one of those things where it's like, that has to be one of the movies ever that you have to like. Whether if it's that, Back to the Future, Jurassic Park, all that. It's one of those 80s movies that you just have to like. It gets funnier every time as soon as you get older. Like, even the stuff where Bill Murray or any of them don't say anything, and it's just the physical comedy of, like the one that always gets me where Howard Ramis is just listening for clues, and then Bill Murray like gets a book and smacks it on the desk and scares Howard Ramis. Like, that scene got me the time I watched it. So I think as you get older, it gets really, really funnier as you go along. So that's why it's number one for me. So guys, that's my ranking of all the Ghostbusters movies. Let me know of what you guys think of it down below, and I'll see you guys next time. Take care. Bye.
Hey there. Subscribe to my channel. And also press this bell icon.